Hemshech Chaim Beis, Volume 1, in the middle of chapter 160, which is page Shin Yutes 319. Okay. So after explaining and discussing the channels, the pipelines, the Kav Hamida and the Kav Hamida and the Knei Hamida, the two different type of channels, one from Gvura, one from Chesed, that one creates and restrains the flow to allow existence to emerge, allow each sphere to emerge, and the second regulates the flow and increases it, which is the Avos, the patriarchs. So in one way they're higher than what the plain maintenance and sustenance of existence is. They bring in another dimension of the divine, of transcendence. And then comes Matan Torah, which is a whole new Or Chodesh. So he's explaining that Torah is also Gvura. Torah also has a Medida, has measurements and parameters. However, these measurements and parameters are Gvura Tagberis HaChayach. They come from a Chayach, Tagberis HaChayach, which is an intensity that draws out from the core Etzem, and that comes in a very measured way, drop by drop. And this Torah travels through entire cosmic order, introducing obviously a new dimension, which is not there based on the pipeline of sustenance of existence, or even through the Avos, through the patriarchs. It brings a whole new energy that wasn't even there, which essentially in the word of Chassidus, it's Atzilus brings into Biyah. Matan Torah bridged the higher and the lower, El Yenim and Tachtenim, which is Atzilus and Biyah, brought the divine into the lower worlds. Whereas the Avos, at best, they realigned the world. Their primary work was in Atzilus, not so much in transforming the lower worlds. And Torah does have the power to transform. So, to explain that, he said, Ubir Inyan in chapter 160, to understand this, let's go back now to Atzilus. What is the meaning of Atzilus? And this will bring us back to understanding the Torah. So Atzilus, the Esser spheres of Atzilus are Mamutza. They're the interface. The 10 spheres of Atzilus serve as an interface between the divine and existence. The question on the table, however, is, how do you find Mamutza, an interface, without some commonality? Interface works when you have a teacher and a student. So they may be very distant, so they need an interface, but they're still in the same league, they're in the same paradigm, the same dimension. When it talks about Gvul and Bli Gvul, where do they meet? One doesn't meet the other. From a perspective of Bli Gvul, of infinity, all finite are equal, the lowest number to the highest. So where's their bridge? That's the question. So to explain this, the Rebbe Rashab goes back and creates a review of everything we've discussed, that there are two hamshachas coming from the divine energy. In other words, what we're going to learn here is that, yes, initially, if you saw the world as an independent gvul, finite entity, and the Bli Gvul as being divine, then you have a problem. But what happens if we establish that the divine manifests also in gvul? Then you have, even the divine, you do have a commonality, because the divine wants gvul. And that's where the commonality is going to be. That looks like where he's leading to, which is a different take. In other words, the Medida is not coming from because the measurements of this existence happens to be finite. It is actually a divine desire, divine energy to manifest in structure, in parameters, and that's as equally divine as the manifesting in without parameters. And the Torah is going to be the manifestation, the ultimate quintessential manifestation of that, because the Torah is Tamshach of Atzmus in Medida. It is the ultimate, as opposed to the world. The world will end up being actually defined and limited. But the desire for a limited existence goes all the way back to the root. So he begins to explain that there's two tracks. And to sum it up, one is Rotzna Elyon, which is Makif, which is the Er HaBli Gvul, the desire that encompasses all of existence equally. And the second is the Kav, which is Midav Gvul. It's an energy that is a defined energy that goes with parameters and is commensurate to the world and manifests in the Esser spheres, in the 10 spheres. In their root, that's the 10 hidden spheres. But there, in the root and the 10 hidden spheres, they're still all part of the so-called soup, the primordial or divine soup, pre-Tzimtzum. But after the Tzimtzum, so-called, allows them to emerge. Until they emerge as 10 distinct spheres and 10 energies. Okay. And from these two Hamshachas Hashpa'as, there's actually a manifestation in existence. One brings Erech HaPayim, like he spoke, God's tolerance, infinite tolerance. As we see that even those that machisan, that anger him, it shows Kama Erech HaPayim, how the extent of his kindness, of his abundant chesed and tolerance. And that's what was sustaining existence. The first 26 generations is Keneged. David HaMelech said, the 26 Kilo Elam Chazdeh, what is that? The 26 generations that were sustained by God's infinite kindness. Even though they didn't deserve it. So it was from above a kindness that was bestowed upon them. From that perspective, which is Makif, called the Chitzenius Makif, everything is equal, so he tolerates darkness and light. It's like a flow without discretion. Then comes the second, that's path 1. That's the path that comes from Makif. Then comes Pnimi, Kav, and Pnimi. The first path is still coming from Makif and Bligvul, so to speak. That's also the first 2,000 years at Toyu. What's Toyu? Toyu is abundant energy, abundant chesed. And he explains in the parentheses, it's abundant chesed that is really not for benefit directly. It's indirectly, because it itself actually ends up shattering the containers. So when you give something in abundance, even if it's good, it ends up shattering. However, there's a deeper purpose in that, as he explained. That shattering is meant to release and free and allow us to refine the dross, the dredges, the excess. Excess not the right word. The residue, we said, the waste. The so-called, we'll call the collateral damage caused by the Tzimtzum. So the Tzimtzum is a concealment, the divine. It has a purpose, but there is possible collateral damage. So this essentially allows us to recognize that the world is not good. The shattering wakes us up to the fact that it is not, there are cracks in existence. Before the Tzimtzum, there are no cracks. The Tzimtzum purpose is to create an independent reality. But as a result, there are potential cracks. The Toyu is the constant, let's call it the perpetual protester against the Tzimtzum. It's the counterforce. It's saying all the time, the Tzimtzum is not a good thing. The purpose of the Tzimtzum is good, but the darkness is not. So it's like a protest against a dysfunctional reality. Yeah. Okay, but the point that we want to make here is that Toyu, the first 2,000 years, is abundance, but abundance that does not sustain. It ultimately shatters with the purpose in it. There's a purpose in it, but nevertheless, it's not tikkun. The purpose is to lead to repair. So that's Toyu. That all comes from more the Bligvul. This explains why God tolerates, in a sense, because what He's doing is this energy is entering into the world in order, like He says, He's good to his foes, to those that hate Him, in order to destroy them, in order to annihilate them. The last verse that He brought. So the goodness is coming. It's an abundant goodness, and His purpose actually is to build in order to raise, to destroy in order to create the refinement that is necessary. Then comes Kav 2, after the first path, which we'll call Bligvul, Ratzon Elyon, the one that is so-called indifferent and allows the flow to come even in a place where it's not appropriate, and actually causing it to shatter. Then comes path 2. So Bligvul causes things to shatter because it's not according to the containers. Second track is the Kav.
Indifferent, what does that mean?
I said that because of that level, Makif, darkness and light are equal. Because it's like removed.
But yet it's a protester, which is hardly...
No, the protest is the shattering. We're talking about how yeah. No, the fact that God can, the fact that there can be, like he said, do me a favor. The fact that there can be, what's the expression here? Yeah. Rav Chesed, the Arachampen, their Chashech, because darkness is light, that's why the flow can go even to a place, even to those that don't deserve. That just explains how the flow can go there. Because the Chetzenis of Makif, there's a certain type of it's removed, it's detached. That makif can create problems if it doesn't have balance, because it's like an energy that hovers above, so it flows both in this direction, into light, into darkness, and so on. But there's a purpose in it all, because ultimately it will overwhelm and will shatter, and that's when the tikkun begins.
That's a teir.
Okay.
Teir's from makif.
Teir's from Rav Chesed and Makif, yeah. Actually, sometimes it actually says that the spheres of Teir are like all ksarim, are all like crowns, because it doesn't have real integration. They always remain. There's a big tension there between energy and container. Tikkun is the ultimate primi. Primi is integration. Teir would be rotze without a shuv. There's imbalance, basically. Then comes the second track. That's the 2000 of Torah. Torah comes from Chochmah. Chochmah is no longer makif. Chochmah is already now coming into integration. Since Chochmah has ktsas din, it has discretion. Ktsas has minor discretion, meaning discretion, it distinguishes between what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, and there.
How does it show? Can you give an example?
Wisdom. As soon as someone is using their mind is by itself, it defines. If you don't use your mind, if someone, let's say, not thinking, they decide to give tzedakah, so they just give everybody. Fine, it has a certain thing. As soon as you start using your mind, you're making discretion. Intelligence is a form of discretion. It's distinguishing. Very simple, basic level. And then, of course, we learned earlier that more din is in bina, and even more midas. But right now, there's ktsas din. But the point of din is, what does din mean? That the medid, it's causing a measured flow. In other words, once you start using chokhmah, if you have a king who only is a king and the leader, authority can do whatever he wants. If he uses wisdom, he starts deciding who to reward, who not to. And this measures the flow. That's what he says. Bottom line is, Torah measures the flow. Torah says regulates what goes here, what doesn't go here, puts things in place. And in general, this is the level of tikkun. Because tikkun is the diminishment of the energy and the abundance of the containers, which means that they're containers to receive the energy. He just qualified that Torah is also called Torah's Chesed, because at the end of the day, Torah is Gilead Pnimi, it's an integrated energy. And even the Gevurah of Torah, even that Torah is measured, as we spoke earlier, either due to intensity or here, due to its regulating the flow, is also part of Chesed. And we didn't look at Likutei Torah, but Likutei Torah distinguishes between the Gevurah before Matan Torah and the Gevurah after Matan Torah. Okay. And this is in general the Kav that comes in a measurement. So we have first the Eir HaBligvul, the Rotz and the Makif, then comes the Kav. And this manifests in the first 2,000 years and the next 2,000 years. Before Matan Torah, after Matan Torah. And from Torah on. Which is two different flows. One, as we said, is a Bligvultika flow. Another is a defined flow. Okay. Now we go on. Yeah, 3 lines. Now, v'hine, and now. Even though the kav comes in a measured flow, it's not some separate entity. It's a mamish, literally a reflection of the divine. It's a direct reflection, a literal reflection of the Ein Sof Baruch Hu. Because energy, light, is Me'ein HaMoyer. It's similar to its source, to the source of the light. Only thing is, this is how Ein Sof, the power of Ein Sof, to radiate, to illuminate in a form of Gula Midah. So you have a field of energy, one illuminates and shines in a bleak Gvuldik way, one is in a Gvul way. But we're not talking here containers, we're not talking here subjects or identities, you're talking here divine energy that is purely divine. It's a reflection, it's Oyer, not Keli, it's not darkness, it's Oyer, but it's an Oyer that is that flows in with parameters. That's the bottom line. And I was going to compare it to Kelim, but only as an example. It's al derech. It's similar to what Avedis HaKodesh writes And we had this Avodas HaKodesh earlier. Avodas HaKodesh is Ibn Gabbai, a great Kabbalist in the early, before that result, I think 12th century maybe. What does he write? Be'inyan HaKelim Des Sfiris.
Was it given in Italy?
Ibn Gabbai, could be Spain even.
Spain?
I'm not sure. It's definitely Ibn Gabbai, yeah. Be'inyan HaKelim Des Sfiris, I'm not sure. But he writes about the containers of the 10 spheres. What does he say? Shezeu Mishleimus Ein Sof. The containers, which is the actual structures of the spheres, is from the Shleimus Ein Sof. It comes from God's all perfection or all completion. All, what we say? We say something is omnipowerful. Omnipotent is everywhere, right?
Yeah.
No, you're right. That's omnipresence. Omnipotent, yeah. The omnipotent power of the divine. Shleimus. That what? Shekashem, this is the Avodas HaKodesh. Kashem sheyesh lekeich bebilti bagvul, just like he has the power in bilti bagvul, in the non-limited, unlimited, the infinite. Ken yesh lekeich begvul. So too, he has the power creating gvul, the power of gvul. So now that Rebbe Rashab is equating the two. He did this before also. So it's actually a kal v'chemer, you could say. Since he has the power to do both, and basically both are coming from divine power. We may not see it that way, but the structure of existence is just as divine power as the so-called lack of structure of existence, or beyond existence rather. So even the bligvul in energy is coming, the same source is also emanating, and is another power, because that's part of God's perfection. It's not part of weakness, it's part of perfection. That's the point, shleimus. It's all part of divine expression. So if you have, let's say, a wise person, just for argument's sake, who has infinite wisdom, and he chooses to allow the infinite wisdom to flow, okay, that's given. Then he chooses to let it flow only for 5 minutes, or let it flow just in a finite parameter. That's all his power. We're not even getting that it's maybe a deeper power, as we've discussed. But it's definitely the equal power. The fact that he's speaking or giving you one idea, not infinite ideas, doesn't make it less him, less expression of his perfection. It's just a different form.
Both expressions, so they're both auras.
Okay, but so he's saying. So the Avodas HaKodesh says this even about the Kalim. He says, "Kamoi kenu b'chinas hakav." Same thing. He's taking the Avodas HaKodesh and taking it back to which is even more so. Obviously, same thing with the kav, with the ray of light, with the thread, with the line of light. This is what an Ein Sof has. Also, this power to radiate in Gvul Midah, which, by the way, some opinions don't hold that, as we learned earlier. Some only say the Kalim are the Koyach HaGvul, and the Eir is part of Bligvul. Even the Eir that goes into the 10 spheres, there's the opinion, we learned this earlier. The opinion of Ayin Beis, however, Ayin Beis follows not his opinion. He follows the opinion that Eir also has Gvul, just for the record. But so in other words, there is an opinion that when you talk about Eir energy is always Bli Gvul. However, God also has the power of Kalim, and that Eir fits into the Kalim. Or like we've discussed, imagine a colorless liquid in tinted glasses. That's their opinion. The opinion here is that the color is also in the energy. So even divine energy, so it's even a deeper chiddush. To say that God can create Kalim is saying, okay, God's flames, of course He can create whatever He wants to create. But you're saying that there's the divine element in the Gvul. That's what the chiddush is. That even, because energy is a divine element. Kalim, you could say divine creation, divine existence, but doesn't necessarily reveal the divine. It just tells you that God can create Chachma, Bina, Chesed, Gvurat, Kalim. When you say Eira Chesed, you're saying that it actually retains a divine element, and it's still a reflection, just as the Bli Gvul is a reflection of Eir, so is the Gvul. So this is Eir HaGvul. Good. All this is coming to explain the Mamutza, because obviously we're going to leading to a place that even Gvul is also part of the divine. So it's going to answer the problem of the Mamutza. The Mamutza's problem is commonality. So that would work if God is Bli Gvul and the world is Gvul. Where do they meet? But if in the divine source there's a Gvul energy and it's also part of the Shleimus, however, we don't relate to it that way. We relate to it because here's a table, I sit at a table. I don't think of it as divine power. That's the challenge. That's what the Torah will help us do. We'll take a medida, we'll take, let's say, a piece of bread, and say, here's the shear, the measurement, and here's the brachim you make. It'll take the material parameters of existence and elevate it to godliness. It's basically revealing the Koyach HaGvul of Ein Sof in the Gvul of the Kelim of the world. That's what Teda will do. But we're not there yet. I'm just setting the stage here. So we continue now. So the Kav is hard. It's a reflection, mamash, of Ein Sof, just another path. Obviously, as we discussed just for the record, when Gvul and Bli Gvul go back to the source, there's a point where they just completely one. Because Atzmus is not divided into two. So there's a point where you're just going to have a field of energy that's neither Bli Gvul or Gvul. I mean, you'd call it Bli Gvul simply because, as we spoke, the default state is Bli Gvul. Because if God manifests, it manifests without limit. And you need a special message to say, flow and stop. As we said, ad kan, to stop, ad pa tove, the gvura that we spoke about. But let's continue. He's still making the case. For Yuvin B'Yeser, and this will be understood increasingly, will be understood even more, Yuvin B'Yeser. And even more, will be even better understood, or B'Yeser, even increasingly understood, Al Pi Mashin Zbar Le'al Perek Tazayin, according to what we learned earlier, chapter 16. Da Gvul de'eres eine b'chinas keach ha'gvul shebe'ein sof. So there, let me just remind you what he said there, and he's repeating it. It's an important point that the gvul of is not. We're not talking about the power of gvul of Kelim. As I just said, that God, for example, let's just. I'm not going to go to Kelim of Atzilus. Let's just say, for example, God created a stone. Did God create a stone? Yeah, that's what Avodas HaKodesh says essentially. That just like He has the power to create, to manifest in a Bli Gvul, He has the power to create something that's finite. The truth is, they're not really a good example because he's talking about Kelim of Atzilus that are one with the divine. But the bottom line is, however, the point is the power to create Gvul. Fine. But there's a distinction. When we say Er HaGvul, we're not just saying the power to create an identity. We're saying that divine energy also has in it so-called identity elements, has particles. According to the other opinion, you'd say the energy is only a wave. And the particle element begins when it enters into a container. Here you're saying even the energy has particles in it. Essentially. That's the difference. So he says, so based on what we learned there, what did we learn? That the Gvul of Eris is not the Koyach HaGvul Shebe'ein Sof. Sharihu Shem Havaya. Because the Er is Shem Havaya. The Koyach HaGvul, and Shem is the Kel Elikim. The Koyach HaGvul, the power to create Kelim, that's the names of Kel and Elikim. Like Kel Shaddai, Elikim, right? But the energy is Havaya. So Havaya is not the same thing. That's what he discussed there. For whom Masha Ein Sof HaBli Gvul, and here's the key, here's the line. And this is how the Ein Sof HaBli Gvul, that the infinite divine energy, Shir Ba'atzmei, measured in himself, or estimated within himself, or allocated, all the different, designated. L'hoyer b'chinas midav gvul. I go back to the thing. The infinite possibilities of an artist, and he chooses and estimates one possibility, which is going to be the 10 spheres. So really, now he's going even further. Really, the Koyach Er HaGvul is part of the Er HaBli Gvul. It's not Bli Gvul because it is Shir Atzmei. This is what he wants now. This, but it is an extension. The Kelim, you don't say Shir Atzmei b'Koyach the Kelim. You don't say that. You don't say that in the Er HaBli Gvul he estimated the Er HaGvul. Because let's go back to the artist. The artist, there's two things. There's estimating what vision you want. Instead of making infinite type of art, I'm going to make a horizon. I'm going to draw a river, whatever, a sky. Then comes another thing, Kelim. As we said, the palette, the canvas, above all the paintbrush, the instruments. That's not the same thing. The instruments are also created by the artist, in this case, the cosmic artist, the God. But the Kelim, you can't say Shir Atzmei b'Koyach. Shir Atzmei b'Koyach is essentially, the Er HaBli Gvul is saying, I want now one manifestation of myself in a revealed way, and it's called Er HaGvul. It's called 10 spheres. Then comes something else, is how that actually happens, the process. He actually wants these containers, that's where he wants to draw them into, and so on. But the containers fundamentally are the kavanah of existence. God wants it to make a dir b'tachtenim. He wants structure because that's where it will manifest. But the energy is still the divine vision. And the divine vision has now gone from a Bli Gvul, Shir Atzmei, and estimated and allocated or envisioned a Er HaGvul.
I'm not sure, why can't you say that about Kem Shir Atzmei? He also also had an idea and a definition.
But it doesn't have any element of Ur. Even if you say that, but you can't say that Shir Atzmi, because it doesn't have any, the Kalim don't have any revelation. They're just, intentionally. And we learned this much earlier. The Kalim are meant to be non-revelatory. The Ur is supposed to bring revelation, because the Kalim, for Dira B'Tachtenim to happen, you need an identity that is solid and independent. That's the thing. So yes, of course God envisioned it and wanted it. But you can't give it you can't give it divine revealed energy. That's what you can't do. The Kalim remain inanimate until the Ur comes and that's the point. In other words, imagine an artist who has infinite possibilities, and then he stands by a canvas, and what is he going to do? Understand? He has the Kalim, but he has nothing to do. He needs direction from his Er HaBligvul to say, create an Er HaGvul, and now we're going to create an image. Think of the Kalim as being the film, and the projector is the light. Okay, so the film is there, but a film without a light, nothing's happening. In this case, the light has a second dimension that's not just white light. There's another measure of light that says, okay, this is the light that's going to fit through the film. So the film is really basically almost like letters, dead letters. Without yeah, exactly. So we said, but letters without air are like a body without a soul.
But why it has nothing to do with Shir B'Atzmi?
Because Shir Atzmi is talking about air. It's all air. It's talking about Shir B'Atzmi V'Keich is a natural thing. It says Shir Atzmi V'Keich Liyas B'Chinas Midul Shir Atzmi Ein Sof. It's an air. Yeah, you could say he envisioned, but that's not what he's talking about there. Lifnei Tzimtzum. Lifnei Tzimtzum says B'Reisha Menusa Demalka, right? Golav Galuf B'Tehirei Law. Yeah. So Shir Atzmi B'Keich. You could say actually, I would say you could say Shir has an element of Kalim, but I'm focusing now on the air part of it. You could say that technically, yes. I correct myself. I mean more precise. But here the focus, however, is that. Well, not just in this case. We're talking about a fundamental difference. The Shir of the Kalim would be, as I said, he wants letters. He wants a structured existence. But if there's no air to enter there, all you have is like a black film. It's like going into a dark room with objects and you can't see anything. The air is where the vision of the divine manifests now in a gvuldik way. In other words, what you have now is two. If you said, let's say, according to Avedis HaKodesh, you say, okay, there's the kav. God has the keche bebilti b'gvul. Bligvul. Keche b'gvul, that's the Kalim. So now you have containers and you have air b'gvul. You don't have an air that is commensurate to the Kalim. How are these two going to meet?
Going to have another sphere.
Now, yes, they could meet, like we said, colorless liquid this, but they won't really be a mamutza here, because you're going to get back to the same problem. Where's the commonality? So the air hagvul is becoming the mamutza in the sense between air b'gvul and Kalim, because this is air, it's vision. In other words, the artist's one image, is it fundamentally different than all the other images of his infinite possibilities? On one hand, it's yes, on one hand, not. It's different because only one out of many. But it's not different because it's still him. It's still a reflection of his art, of his soul, of his spirit. That's the point. Kalim are not a reflection of the divine spirit. They're expression of God's will. But they don't reflect anything. Remember, we learned earlier that that you can't know the Koyach HaAtzmus in the Yesh until the Air comes. Even though it's there. The Yesh has things to reveal about Atzmus that Air does not have. But without the Air, it remains a secret that's locked into the Keli. It would be like you meet something and you have no clue because you have no intelligence or tools to reveal anything. Remember, revelation is a critical component in all of this. Air is the element of revelation, is the element of awareness, consciousness, if you wish. Keli is the presence of what God wants. It would be like God's desire without wisdom. Ratzon. He wanted a world, and that's it. He gave us no wisdom, no Torah, God forbid, to understand existence. So what would you have? You wouldn't have a world like ours, and you wouldn't be able to process of doing anything about it. Okay. And this is it. And this Eid HaGvul, now that he envisioned, the artist envisioned now this one, the 10 spheres, it's in a form of Dveikus B'Mkede. It's Eid. Its cleaves attached to its source. The Zeu Mashu B'B'chinas Eid. That's what it means that it's in the state of Eid. The Chol Eid Eyev Shali is Kim B'Chinas Dveikus. Eid, by definition, cannot be unless it's in a form of Dveikus. What is Eid? Eid means it's reflecting something. Hinoida, as it's known. Therefore, because it's Eir and not Keli, in other words, it's an Eir, it's in a form of Dveikus B'Mekele, it's connected to its source, Ume'ein, and similar to its source. Shagamu B'chinas Ein Sof. Because also this, the Eir, even the Eir HaGvul, is also in a state of Ein Sof. V'hu inyan HaKanaf min Kanaf. This goes back all the way back to those chapters. Remember with tzitzis. So what's the story? The strands, the tzitzis, the fringes, the strings, have a paradox.
Hassles.
Yeah. They have to be of the same material as the garment, as the makif, as the actual talis, but they cannot be an extension of it. They have to be separate. In other words, they extend from it. But you can't, for example, take a talis and just at the edges cut eight so-called make eight slash whatever.
Hassles.
Right, whatever it is. The edge. You need to take and attach. So it's min kanaf, but not kanaf. So I explained earlier, that's the Eir HaGvul. The Eir HaGvul is of the same personality because it is Eir, and it's Eir that comes from the Ein Sof, but it is personality, it is actually 10, it has 10 spheres, 10 energies. Yeah. That's what that was discussed earlier, much earlier. Okay. That's
the same. You just narrowed and focused it to 10 spheres, right?
Not exactly. The word exactly is a very confusing word.
No, not exactly. Oh, okay. Yeah, but it's the same. It's coming from the Ein Sof. He just he focused and he narrowed it to.
So it's from the min kanaf. It's from the same personality of Ein Sof.
Evolved to 10 spheres.
I wouldn't use the word evolved. It shows 10. If it was evolved, then you could just say it's an extension of the talis. It's not extension. It's two sides to it.
It's not an extension because it comes after the tzimtzum.
We're not talking after the tzimtzum. We're talking before the tzimtzum now. So here's how it goes. In a talis, you could have three options. You have a talis.
When we're talking about the kelim of Atzilus?
You have three options. No. We're talking here before the tzimtzum. Shir atzmi. Now, you can go, and you know what? At the edges of the four corners of a talis, you take a knife or a scissor, and you make whatever. What do we call them? Strips. It's still attached, but at the corners. That's one option. Another option is, no, you tie strings, but it's not from the same material of the talis. Whatever. You make it out of silk. Completely different. You made it out of lasagna. Whatever.
Polyester.
Spaghetti.
More accurate.
Right.
Election time.
Okay. So those are two scenarios. Those two would be that there's no real relationship except you attach them. Well, no. The first one, the relationship is, but it's still completely, it's too attached, so to speak. It's the same thing. The second option is something else completely. That would be like the kalim in a way. And the third option is that it's made from the same material, but it's not. And it's attached by hand. You tie it to it, but it's not of the actual beged. That's essentially the Mekanaf min Kanaf.
Cotton made of cotton and with little tzitzis. Have you seen it?
Yeah, but that's because maybe because it's the same category of when you say.
Oh, it's the same.
You could have that.
Okay, that's the category. Sure, you can.
You could have wool and cotton.
No, because around by the Kanaf they make it the same. I think they make the same.
Okay, maybe that's it. Yeah.
No, you can buy.
But they're not. But I think with the.
That's why you always see these.
No, he says, but at the edges with the tzitzis, you see sometimes the edges have made of a different material, like a little silkish.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's what the reason for that is. I think it's because it's...
A cotton, talis cotton with wool tzitzis. It's all done.
Yeah, but it could be the corner.
Yeah, I think
no, there are so. Maybe those are not so muhudir. I don't know.
Type of.
Yeah, I got you. I understand. It's not spaghetti. It's not spaghetti.
Right.
No. Cotton and wool share exactly the same thing. They're both semer. One is semer geffen and one is semer. That's why we say if you wear cotton.
Okay, fine, but it's not a contradiction. It's the same. Okay, let's go here.
It's not the same thing. Semer is high.
That's why we can wear cotton.
Cotton is from here.
How come we can wear cotton? Because it's the relationship. Because it's called
Sie ist doch nicht das immer 100, was meinst du?
semer geffen.
Pale,
That's why. Because it's semer geffen.
Fühlt sich nicht, nein, das ist.
Okay, let's continue.
It's kosher, but it's not.
Half the world is wearing that.
That tzitzis and b'chinas er pnimi. Tzitzis are a level of er pnimi. That's what the symbolism of the strands are. they're distinguished, they flow, they're like the kav. The talis is makif. It's a garment. You just put it on. It's an equalizer. You just put it on. But the tzitzis are individual strands, so they reflect pnimi. This is a known rule. And nevertheless, they're of the same substance, the same material, same personality as the actual garment. So this is where is hagvul, shir atzmei b'koyach, and so on. Now let's just to take a little exercise in imagination. According to the opinion that is only wave and no particles and does not have any spheres, you could argue that's not like tzitzis. It would be take as if you took a talis and take made. So it remains makif. It remains makif. However, like we said, you're preparing it. So in other words, it's like colorless liquid in tinted glasses. But technically, you could say that God
give a personality.
God shir atzmei b'koyach. No, you could argue in that position, that's how He chose to make the 10 spheres. They're not really 10. They're just really part of the original. The fact that they're separate means that they're still but they're that is hagvul. He's giving it almost a separate track.
Ha'ara. It's a separate.
No, but ha'ara is the other opposite. Ha'ara means that it's attached. It's a reflection of.
But the way it's explained.
Gvul is also ha'ara. The point, however, is 1 second.
It's mashma from here. The gvul.
Okay.
It's like the way you said that you cut it into strands. That's what it looks like from it. I mean, if you just type the words.
No. Tzitzis is not kayach.
And he's explaining it, but before when he explained.
No, it's the same thing. Go back to Perek Zayin. This is as clear as day. It doesn't say what you're saying.
It is as clear as day, but that's why I'm not understanding when he's saying that the bligvul became.
Shir atzmei b'koyach. It didn't become. It doesn't say it became. You keep using the word becoming. It doesn't say such a thing. I just told you, an artist has infinite possibilities, and then he envisions one. It didn't become. He chose to now focus on one, and that's it. The bligvul doesn't go away. The bligvul didn't become this. It came from out of there. Out of infinite possibilities of spheres, he chose one particular structure. But it's still his art. It's just one, not infinite. It's still his vision, let's put it this way.
And nothing happened to his vision. Nothing changed. Even though he chose one. As a comparison.
Look, to give an example in our human lives is hard because we don't have bligvul mamash in us. So it's hard to example. I will give an example. When you educate a child, or you apply yourself to someone you care about, and you are relatively to that person bligvul, just for argument's sake, relatively. You're an adult, a talmid chacham, a tzaddik. It's a completely different level. He bends now down to his child, who's a 1-year-old child, and plays with him. Okay? So there's a beauty to that, What's he doing exactly? So you could argue, you know what he's doing? He's compromising himself because for the love of the child and chinuch, he is really not there on that level. He belongs where he is when he's learning, when he's on the top of the mountain, when he's talking to God, etc. However, because this world is a limited world, the child is still a child, doesn't understand those lofty things. So what he does is he goes down to his level and plays with him. Fine. But there's nothing in him that really identifies with that. He's just doing it out of obligation, with love. Not saying he's forced. Or you can say no. He has in him an element that he actually has that part inside of him. And when he's bending down, he's just going to another dimension within himself. When he's learning and he's with Hashem, is a bligvul place. And here is a place where he actually has a real relationship. He is actually invested, and it's not just he's doing it for the child, also there's a part of him that is being expressed here. In a way, a child within, in a dimension maybe that's even deeper than the dimension. That's just a small example. So if the Eir HaBligvul didn't have this, that would be, okay, I go down because I have to go down, I have no choice, so to speak. Or that's what we have to do in this world. Or it actually is a part of the brilliance of this tzaddik or the chacham or this bligvul person is to look inside himself and find within himself the ability to actually speak to a child. And then that speaks to the child. So the first one would be the child is the keli, and the Eir HaBligvul came down to it, fine. In the second scenario, you have the Eira Bli Gvul also has an Eira Gvul in it, and that Eira Gvul is communicating. That's an example I would give. I don't know if it works or not. Just came to me right now.
There's operating instructions from upstairs.
Yes, it basically creates in other words, it creates a far deeper integration and unity between Elokus and the world. This second option. It means godliness actually does have a dimension that, in simple terms, when the Eibishter answers your prayer, does he care about you on your terms? You could say, he cares because he created me, he loves me, so he cares, but fundamentally there's nothing in Elokus that should really care about one individual. Everything is really, like he said, equal even. You could make that argument. He cares with Poel because he did create and he does love. But you can't find in Elokus, so to speak, an element of that dimension. But if you can find in Elokus that God is not limited to being Bli Gvul, he actually has that dimension, godliness, I should say, then our relationship is also on a divine. There's a real relationship. We've talked about this, but there's far more deeper interface. There's no question that's where he's going. And I think if you find this, if you use this as a model for personal relationships, it can be a tremendous example, because ultimately it comes down, as we said many times, the only way to really relate this is through Avodah. As Scholar, you're never going to get it exactly how it's before the Tzimtzum. You can find examples, like I said, of how a person applies. Like I saw, like the Rebbe, like Ba'emer. He didn't just come out and, okay, children are children, so you got to give them an hour and then play with them or talk to them. There was a true dimension of Pnimis that you saw with the Rebbe with children you didn't see with adults. It's a whole different Rebbe in a way. Actually, much more begili, not just begili that he smiled, a whole different presence. It was like a certain emes that came out. I don't know if you ever noticed it. Because I guess a Rebbe's Kanai Yisrael V'Aveyu has in him that dimension as well. So the point I'm trying to say is that shows you far greater. It's not just a great man coming to, I'll spend some time with a few kids and so on. It shows that he's taken a part of himself, is actually applying and connected to that. When the Mittler Rebbe, for example, another example, the Yechidus, when he said that he stopped the Yechidus, the story, the long line, everybody was waiting. He was taking Yechidus after one of the holidays, and then suddenly he stopped in the middle. And they waited more and more time. They didn't know what's going on. The Gabbai heard the Mittler Rebbe crying, and then he resumed. Later, to make the long story short, he asked him, or he told him, he said that he has to find it himself, and he heard something that was so horrible he couldn't even find B'dakas. Subtle. That's an example. Why? You could say the Rebbe is a smart man. He's a brilliant man. You come to him. What does he have to find in himself? He gives you advice. But to say that he actually, like they say, Mittler Rebbe would have to change his shirt after every Yechidus, which means he lived, Ibigelept, what problem came to him, that means his mom is there. Like what does the Friedrich Rebbe says, Asher Karohu. As if it happened to him, that's an Eir HaGvul. That means in the Rebbe's presence there is, in some way you can identify mamish with you as if it's you. So it's a far deeper dimension, not just giving advice. It's like what the Rebbe says, V'sheftayich Yitzayich. You could say, okay, he's a shefet. That's from he's an authority. A Yitzayich is an advisor. But imagine someone is both. Someone could be a shefet and authority, and also can also be a friend. I mean, it's not so common. You do need to have two different, like Aseh l'charav, Knei l'chachaver. But I'm just trying to explain that one is more the fact that he can apply himself and actually put himself. Because people often say, the Rebbe, did he really know me the way I know me? Or he knew me as Elokus knows me, Das Elyon.
I always had a question, did he know everybody's name? Yeah.
Fine. But I'm talking about, he could say he had a great memory, so he knows everybody's name. Or whatever. But it's more than the name. Does he know you the way you know yourself? Or like he wouldn't identify with you because you're shtusim, not on his level. Kind of verstehen deinen, our Narishkeit. Yeah, I'm talking about. But when you say Eir has in Gvul, I'm not saying it goes all the way to that. It's like there's an element of Shchinta Begalusa where God in some way is in our pain and in our situation. It definitely makes the relationship far deeper. Now, of course, Eir HaGvul is not pain. Eir HaGvul is not Golas. But it sets the stage that there's a divine element even in Gvul. That's a key point here. I mean, we can go on and on, but I'm sure you can find more examples. It's clear that's the Chiddush here. That means what I just said is in a way the crux of Ayin Beis. This point where Gvul meets Bli Gvul, because Gvul, that Elokus does have in it Eir HaGvul, not just Keyach HaGvul.
So you're saying they fundamentally both.
Also, if you say the color.
Also, we say Koyach HaGvul, you're saying the Koyach HaKol Yachol. God could do anything, so He can go, He can create a stone. Even though He Himself is not a stone, even though He's not finite, He can create the finite. When you say it's Eir HaGvul, you're saying something far deeper. You're not just saying He can do anything, you're saying that He could do it, and there's a divine dimension in it. It's essentially divine. Even while it's a big chiddush. Because it's much easier to just say Eir is Bli Gvul, and if you want Gvul, you got to go into the world of Kalim. But you're not going to find in godliness Gvul, so to speak.
You have another problem to contend with if you say that the colorless liquid in containers. How does Bli Gvul fit into Gvul?
That was he said. By the way, what you said is one of the proofs that he brought.
That is.
Look, there's an advantage to the other shitta too.
Yeah.
That's why we say all are true. They talk more premium. The advantage of the other one, it's more Bli Gvuldik. Where here, in a way, the question is how Bli Gvul is the Gvul or Gvul. Even though it is, but it's not as quite the same way.
So besides contending the fact that it's more of a connection, it's also the fact that you have to contend with this question of how does Bli Gvul fit into.
Yeah, absolutely, and probably some more questions. Also, the Shammai and Hillel discussion, where they heard different things from Shmai Vavtayan. That means in the
proofs, but
yeah, I got it. Yeah, it's good. This is going back to. This is very refreshing. It's going back to the original ideas in the early part of Ayin Beis. I'm glad he's bringing it here because it gives you, the links are here. So let's continue in Kamachash. That's it. Same prim min kanaf. Befrat, and now goes even more. Befrat, if you mention is Barlei al Pedekov Ches, and specifically according to what he discussed earlier, chapter 28, the Ba'er Pnimi Yesh Be'Bchinas Hareisha Me'er and Sef Bli Gvul. So now comes another point. So Sofrei made 3 points. Point number 1, he brought like the Aveda Shekedish to Kashem. Just like there's a Keich HaGvul, there's a Keich HaBli Gvul, there's also an Eir HaGvul and Eir HaBli Gvul. The second point he made, according to chapter 16, that's the Shir Atzmi, the Min Kanaf. And now he's saying, it's all going back. Chapter 28, he said there's a Reishim. Now there's something more he's adding. Not only did he envision it, but there's a Reishim. In the Eir HaGvul, there remains a impression from the Eir and Sof HaBli Gvul. Then there's Boyer Sham, because we explained there, she has Beis Minei Tzimtzum. There are 2 types of tzimtzum. The B'chinas ha'er shelo ha'er b'midav ha'gvul ha'in b'sheira she'mokar ha'er pnimi. Because in the level of energy that radiates in the form of parameters, ha'ya tzimtzum b'chinas miyut levad. The tzimtzum was only in a diminished way. Or be'erin sef ha'bli gvul ha'ya tzimtzum b'chinas siluk. And the erin sef ha'bli gvul, the tzimtzum is siluk. So there's a distinction here. Once the tzimtzum comes, the bli gvul has to be completely removed. The Gvul, Eir HaGvul doesn't have to be completely removed. Remember he said then, that's the Havamin and the Eitz Chaim, that the Kav could remain without a Tzimtzum. And you only have the Tzimtzum because of the Kalim. In other words, because the Eir HaGvul is rooted, the Eir HaGvul after the Tzimtzum, the Esser is rooted in Eir HaGvul before, you don't need complete removal. Okay. The B'chinas Siluk Eir Nisha Rishim Ma'er in Sof HaBli Gvul Ba'er Shalahayer B'midav HaGvul. And this Siluk, even though it was all removed, something remained, some residue, some impression remained from the infinite energy that was removed in the energy that radiates in a defined way.
That became the energy that's the Gvul. That became?
No, that's the first step. That's Shir Atzmei B'Keich. I wouldn't say it became. I told you, it's envisioned. He allocated, estimated.
No, here they say B'chinas Silika Nisha Rishimu.
Nisha Rishimu.
That's for the Kalim, right? That's not for the...
No, that's for the Eir. The Eir itself, HaBli Gvul, left an impression in the Eir HaGvul. Eir HaGvul. We're not talking about Kalim now.
After the total Siluk, whatever was left, the Rishimu that was left.
No, that's not what he's saying.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand.
No, read the line before, you'll understand. When he started, yes, right? Why don't you read Pedek Chav Ches? Read the first line for Pedek Chav Ches. Read from the beginning of it. Be'er primi yesh boi b'chinas hareishim. It has in it an impression from the Eir and Sof HaBli Gvul that was there before. He's just concluding that point now.
So first it was only Bli Gvul, then it was this Siluk.
No. Then was Shir Atzmei B'Keich. Then he envisioned 10 spheres.
That was before the Siluk.
Yeah. So now we have 2 types of energy: Eir HaBli Gvul, Eir HaGvul. Fine. Kanaf and Min Kanaf.
But that's all within the overall.
Yeah. Then comes the Tzimtzum. In the Eir HaBli Gvul, the air is completely has to be removed because it's too intense. The Eir HaGvul needs only diminishing. But when that happens, there's shimush, something remains from the Eir HaBligvul even after the siluk, even afterwards, in the Eir
And
HaGvul.
they combine?
It speaks to it. There's some, let's put it this way, in the Eir HaGvul it still has a memory. It still has in its code somewhere, knows that it originated from Eir HaBligvul. That's what it means.
That was very important.
Yeah. But if you look back in Perek Chov Ches, it says it all there. There's nothing new here.
Siluk was gone, basically.
Yeah, because the siluk is not, The look there, he explains it. And this is the cause for the two paradoxical features in the kav. Because now we're going to show it. Here's a paradox. On one hand, it's kav hamida. It's a line that measures, a measuring line. V'gam poel hiskalus. On the other hand, it causes hiskalus. The kav doesn't just shape different entities. It also interconnects them. The antu de koshelon. That's from Pasach Eliyah. That he is one that binds them all together. The kav, that is. Because somewhere else it explains elsewhere it explains because the kav be'etzim is Ein Sof HaBligvul. That's not the shita here. You'll see. But because it transmits through the tzimtzum she'eser be'agbola, that causes it to have agbola. But fundamentally it's bligvul. That's the other shita. That the air is always bligvul, and only the kelim are gvul. Right? And through this, the tzimtzum causes the two things. The kav creates the scholars because fundamentally it's bligvul, so it connects everything. The reason that the kav appears like a measure, that's purely from the tzimtzum. It's superimposed. It's nothing in the kav that has an element of that measure. But here, but according to what we're learning here, that the kav, even in its root, it's rooted in energy to radiate in the second track, in the finite and parameters. So according to our opinion here, that we're following, how they have two opposites. In other words, how does that have the element of iskalus? The air itself is gvul from the beginning, so it should only measure. How does it have the ability to connect spheres?
Each shit has questions that have.
Yeah, of course. The answer is because there's a reshim. According to this opinion, there's a reshim. Something remains from the bligvul in the kav. So the kav has an element of a type of memory of bligvul. That's what allows it to connect. Let's put it this way: if the kav created our human bodies, we'd only have separate organs. Who tells them to speak to each other? And as the reshim from the Eir HaBligvul in the Eir HaGvul, the kav has an element that's also saying speak to each other, connect. You're dependent on each other.
The reshim is in Narizal?
No, this is a different reshima. This is a chiddush, I think, in the Alter Rebbe. No, completely not. Different reshima. It has
like elements of, that's what it means.
Yeah, here means reshim means that something remains. Remember, look at it this way. The artist is painting one picture. Remember, out of infinite. This one picture, does it have any idea of all the other? The answer is yes. It knows of the other, and you'll see sometimes in art, you could say, if a real chacham, a real expert can look at the art and say, I know who did this, because I know his personality. I know his other types of art. In other words, there is something remains embedded in there. It's not dominant, but it's there. Yeah. This is a very fundamental chapter. Ooh. Meshur, right? And because the kav is meshur, that we said before, it's meshur. It's estimated and it's allocated. I keep, it's like that envisioning from the Ein Sof HaBligvul. The gam now also, and also second thing, like he said, gam yesh be'reishim Ein Sof, and it also has a reishim. This impression that we said from the infinite, v'hu b'chinas midah v'gvul. And it's also midah v'gvul, so it has both sides. Al-kain hu b'chinas memutza ben Ein Sof el Elamos. That's why it's an interface between Elikus, between the infinite light and the worlds. In order for there to be the creation of Ak from Ein Sof, which is called Odem de Bria, it's a structured world. The Klolos, Bria de Klolos, in the macrocosm. That's through the Kav that comes from Ein Sof. Because because this is a transmission in a finite and parametered fashion. And it's a mamish, a literal reflection from Ein Sof. So it has both qualities. So that's why that's shir bas milahoyer b'midav v'gvul.
Right. He clarified right away.
That this is what Ein Sof has in it. Shir b'atzmei. He envisioned, he allocated, he estimated within himself to radiate a midav v'gvul. The zesha who mashur b'Ein Sof abligul v'gam yesh b'reish ma'Ein Sof. That's saying again. He's just look how many times he's emphasizing because he wants to drive the point home. And that was mashur because it's mashur from Ein Sof abligul. It's rooted there. That's where it was envisioned. V'gam yesh b'reish ma'Ein Sof, and also remains even afterwards. Still has a impression. Harimitzaza yesh his damus ala Ein Sof abligul. You hear? That makes it his damus. That's the commonality. Remember the question of mamutza was there's nothing in common between Ein Gvul and Ein abligul.
Commonality is that it's Eid.
So this is the commonality.
Can't you say that?
No, but Eir is no, but then we could say it's Eir, but Eir Gvul, but not Bligvul.
No, but it's that.
No, but that doesn't give commonality to Bligvul. We want the commonality to Bligvul, not just to Eir and Moir.
Right.
There you go. That's its. You see here what he's saying? That's the interface. The interface, it's his damus. It's similar to the Ein Sof Abligvul on one end, and being that it has midav v'gvul because that's what he envisioned, and that makes it similar to the level of ak. That's where the kav is an interface.
They found something that has gvul and bligvul, and they connect.
Yeah, it's essentially the divine energy. The divine desire to create gvul is the interface.
But the other shit
That's
is
right.
the other shit is
That's number one, and number two, he's going to come down and say this kav now radiates in Atzilus. So Atzilus has that power, but it's rooted in. This is the engine room. This is the source of the. It's a double code basically in it. Yeah.
But couldn't we have?
Wouldn't the other shit to say that the kav and the kelim are the mamutza, right? Kav and kelim together are mamutza. One aspect of it has the gvul, and one aspect of it has the gvul.
Yeah. But there'd be a problem because they'd be more difficult for them to meet. Where do they really meet?
I mean, in the kelim.
Yeah, but there's no real mamutza. It's not as deep as this mamutza. Yeah.
Because you have the same question then. You have the same question. And as Or Cain and me, there's nothing really.
That's why I gave the example with the father over the tzaddik. But by them, it would be that the Ein Habligvul bends itself down to the kelim because of whatever reason. But it doesn't. Yeah. They would actually say the Mittler Rebbe that what he did, that's not what he's supposed to do. You're supposed to remain detached, so to speak, because you want to elevate the person. Why are you dressing up in his garment, so to speak? But remember, here the kavanah is to go in order to elevate. It's not Chas v'Shalom that the Rebbe went down to that level. He's going there to create a commonality. I think the story with Mittler Rebbe is an excellent story to capture this, because you could see an argument to be made that a tzaddik does not do that. Like in a way, the difference between Moshe and Aaron. Kol b'nei Yisrael or Kol Yisrael. They cried. For Aaron it says all the Jews, because he created Shalom Bayis. And by Moshe only Kol b'nei Yisrael. Not that the others didn't, but it was not because what? Because Moshe was Shushbina the Malka. And he was not involved in the details of going underground. He was the Navi. He was the Rebbe. He was above. Aaron would go speak to people. He was the advisor. He was the friend. Talmid of Shal Aaron. Two different roles. But you could make the argument that Moshe is more Eretz Pshutim and Aaron is more Eretz Mitziyarim in that way. But what you really want is Moshe to be able to go down. That's the best. If Moshe does that, then you really have.
It says Moshe is Chetzi and Ma'ila Chetzi.
Yeah, so for sure Moshe is the mamutza in that way. Of course, mamutza machaber. That's what it says. But I'm just giving an example of the distinction. I want to just give the example between the two different shittas, how they would apply. Like the Eretz Pshutim also goes into, even according to other opinion, also goes into the kelim. The kav will also ultimately be midav v'gvul, but it's not from its own. It's the tzimtzum that imposes it, superimposes it. Whereas here the Eid itself has it, but it also retains. Yeah, very good. Okay, let's do the kitzur and we'll stop here. Kitzur ubira in the hinatzilus mamutza ben Ein Sof ve'elamis. The explanation of the inyan of what Torah is, Gvura, that Atzilus is the interface between the divine energy and the worlds. But Tzarchlav and Alei Mamutza Yitzdak b'dvarim shem be'erach zelazah. K'boi mashpiu mekabel. Mamutza is fitting in things that are commensurate to one another. Like a mashpia or makabel, a teacher and a student. But how do you fit it? How is it appropriate? How is it yitzdak? How is it justified? In between gvul and bli gvul.
Is that Maris Gedolos and Maris Gitanos, by the way? No.
I don't know. For Inyan who, and the Inyan of this is the is Barish is based on Shachs B'chinas Ein Sof B'chinas Midav Gvul. And we explained that there are two types of transmissions. One is in the say B'chinas Ein Sof infinite, and one is Midav Gvul measured, defined. V'zeu kamoi erechapayim lefonov. Or kama, sorry. V'zeu kama erechapayim lefonov. And that's, look how much tolerance, patience he has. That's the abundance of energy in Tayu and the level of chesed, kindness. Right? Through that was the break, the shattering. The purpose, as we learned, is to separate the pselis and distinguish it, right, and free itself. So you break it, right, that's good. It's like you break the nut. The Teira inyan hatikun, b'chinas midah, and Teira after Tayu, the 2,000 Teira, that's the level of tikkun repair, the state of b'chinas midah. That's already measured. Be'etzem b'chinas Teira's chesed, and be'etzem Teira, even midah is also be'etzem Teira's chesed, even when it manifests in gvura. V'hu inyan akav. This is the kav, the line of light. V'harishor she'me'era ein sof, because its root is in infinite light, min konof. It's the same personality, same substance, same material. It also has a impression, a leftover impression from the Ein Sof. And that's why he says clearly that it's both gvul and bli gvul. And that's why his interface, that from Ein Sof, should be the creation of Ak.
Every level there's a mamutza.
Fine. No, but this is a fundamental mamutza. This, everything else is going to come from this. Because this is where they meet, the Shir Atzmei. When that happens, I wish I was there that moment. That would be nice when God envisioned. Can we think we can ever go there? Yeah, I'm sure on some level of Aveda. Okay, we'll stop here. We'll change. We finished chapter 160, page 319 and 320.